Hello, this is Brian O'Haron. I had a very unusual entry music this evening, and I will play the same at the end of the program, last 4 or 5 minutes. I think it's very moving. The introduction and conclusion tonight is by the participants and the bagpiper from the 6th Annual Relay for Life, held recently at Regional 7 to benefit cancer research. This is a very, very good example in Winston of a group of youngsters and adults acting like adults, not adults acting like children, some of which we have seen this week in a selectmen meeting. What you saw and heard was the participation in the evening, very moving, of their quiet march. The film was taken by the well-known local cameraman, Jay Budahese. Jay filmed almost 4 hours of the 24-hour or so event that raised $150,000 or more for charity. Jay's recording has been shown on local charter cable, Channel 13 and maybe perhaps 15, and will, with luck, if it hasn't been already, be shown in Torrington and Litchfield soon. Jay also was a participant walking a good distance along the route. Thanks to the organizers of this event, the participants, and Jay for all their good work. And thanks to Selectman Gene Berlinski, Mayor Kenneth Fracasso, and Torrington Mayor Ryan Bingham for participating and continuing to set a good example for others to follow. This week's special guest of honor will be the new town manager, once again, Keith J. Robbins. His picture will be shown from time to time throughout the meeting. If you see him around town, introduce yourself, schedule a meeting with him if you desire, and if you need information or have ideas or concerns, be sure to discuss them with him when you have the meeting. The town manager, in my opinion, is doing, and that of many others in town that I talk to, is doing an excellent job in a very challenging position. He has devoted a great deal of time to the job and is coming up to speed very rapidly. He is direct and to the point. The town manager is the chief executive officer, CEO of the town, as the charter says he should be, and as such is involved in almost everything personally or through members of his organization. He is learning fast, and due to his past experience, has become very productive very soon. Thank you, Keith. This has been a week of some minor misunderstandings that can be easily and are being easily rectified. There were a couple of minor misunderstandings in the local newspapers, a couple of minor misunderstandings by the town manager, and a minor misunderstanding by one of the minority selectmen during the meeting. You can see this meeting replayed partially on Channel 13 at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. The camera wasn't there for the first, I would say, third or so, or maybe first quarter of the meeting, so it's not all on videotape, but what is there is very revealing. So I would advise you all that are interested in the management of the town and the progress of these 5 businessmen and the progress of the 2 minority members to listen to my comments tonight and then watch the meeting on TV for yourself. As you know from previous Planning for Success programs, and remember I set up this program to help using the town management and government as an example to show you techniques and help people understand what it takes to run a business, and because we are a business, the town is a business, as we all know now, and that's why I set up this program. So tonight I'm going to give a couple examples, and we'll talk about them. So as you know, this is kind of par for the course when you're moving fast. We expect people to make mistakes. And we expect misunderstandings because people come from different backgrounds. They have different educations. They have different business experience. Some have no business experience. They have education experience. So we've got a mixed bag here in some respects. There will be misunderstandings because we don't all speak the same language. When I was in Italy and in France and in other countries, I didn't get every word, I can tell you that. You know, I could get the gist of most paragraphs and most sentences, but not every word. So that's kind of how it is here. There are going to be those misunderstandings. The important thing is to keep a lookout when you're moving fast, to keep a lookout for mistakes, own up to your own mistakes, and not make an important, large, irreversible mistake that is difficult and expensive to reverse. Now, I don't consider any of these mistakes large and irreversible. You know, these were small nits that we're talking about this week. When a mistake is recognized, it is best to resolve quietly, not run to the newspapers like we did in the last couple of weeks, but it's best to resolve it quietly between the town manager and the other selectmen. And try not to run to the newspapers before you go see the town manager and the other selectmen and discuss the misunderstanding, because these newspapers, they're published all over this area, not just in Winsted. They're published in you know, I guess in Torrington and in all the surrounding towns and Waterbury and places like that. So we want to make sure that we don't embarrass our town. If we take every mistake as a politically damaging opportunity to embarrass the other party or embarrass the town manager, everyone in town loses. Nobody wins when that happens. And remember, we do want to have a good image of our town, and I know that the summit meeting that I went to a few months ago, that was one of the major issues, and I mentioned that on my program. We need to have a good image of Winsted throughout Connecticut and throughout New England and throughout the United States and throughout the world if we can. So we need to really be careful about this, and we need to work together as a team. And I know in your own households, whenever you have a little spat with a child or a grandparent or your husband or wife or your partner or whatever, you don't run to the newspaper. First, you try to resolve it. You try to work it out. And matter of fact, you don't even go to the neighbors. Usually, you try to keep it within the family. So we need to keep it in our family. Try to work things out, and then come to the selectmen meetings with a positive statement, either whatever it may be, and keep things moving positively. So tonight, I'm talking about these before I get to the selectmen meeting review, because I don't want to do it in the middle of the selectmen meeting review, because I think the selectmen meeting was a very good meeting despite this, right? So remember what we talked about in the early days, even before the election, and that when we're moving fast, as in modern day basketball and other sports, we are going to have misunderstanding, miscues, and mistakes. The important thing is that we keep an eye out for them, catch them when they happen, listen to people when they give us feedback, and then correct these mistakes, and then try not to make them again. Remember that Ted Williams, the great Boston Red Sox baseball player, only batted a 400% at his best. He didn't average 400%, but he did bat 400% in one or more seasons. I'm not exactly sure, or so. But people remember him for his accomplishments, not his misses. If you vote for selectmen in the future, most of you that are watching, I assume, or if you're students trying to learn, and I know plenty of students do watch this program, if you vote for selectmen in the future or contemplate running yourself for office, here are some tips. Number one, there were also a good deal of attempts at micromanaging of the town manager, once again, by one of the minority party selectmen. When I first joined the Charter Revision Commission in, I guess it was December of '07, at our first meeting, one of the first things they said in January, at one of the next meetings, probably the third meeting, was we all agree that one of the biggest problems we have in our town is micromanaging the town manager, not giving him the air to breathe, not giving him the responsibility and authority to do his job. If you watch the rerun on Saturday morning at 9 a.m., you will see plenty of micromanagement, and you can guess for yourself who it was. To ask the town manager why he had meetings with certain selected people is micromanagement. It's not necessary. The town manager must be trusted. He's not a child. This is a professional manager. He must be trusted to bring issues to the selectmen when necessary to meet his goals and objectives, or to inform the selectmen of things that he feels important. In this particular case, and I'll show you, this is the list I got from the packet that was presented by the town manager. I would say there's 25 or 30 people that went in to meet with him over the 2 weeks, one of whom was Brian O'Haron. And the selectmen asked, well, what was that about? And asked for maybe 3 or 4 people out of the 25. So town manager did answer the questions. He gave good answers, and but basically it's kind of none of the business. A lot of this stuff, it's his business. He's supposed to be running the town, and he needs the room, the authority, the trust, etc., to be able to do so. Now, if he does make a mistake or a misinterpretation, they should bring that to his attention. My view is the best thing to do is to do it outside the select meeting. Go to his office, make a phone call, send him an email, arrange to see him, and then when that's done, you'll probably feel much more comfortable about it, and together you can do something positively at the select meeting to show that we're all a team and we're all working together and nobody's out to undermine anybody else. The next thing that you'll see a very good example of, and you should learn now before you become a selectman or before you run for office or before you choose the next selectman, there was also an example or two of paranoia. We have a lot of paranoia here between political parties and between the town and people, and people are always exhibit this paranoia, and there were a couple examples exhibited at this meeting, in my opinion. The Planning and Zoning Commission chose a vendor and asked the selectmen to approve a draft contract for this vendor. Prior to the vote, a minority selectman asked if any selectman had dealings with the vendor in the past. Now remember, they did not choose the vendor. They were just asked to approve the unsigned contract that the planning and zoning people put together for the vendor, with the vendor. The selectmen did not select the vendor, and the question, in my opinion, was asked to the wrong people. During the public comment session, a resident asked the same questions of all the selectmen. Have you done, basically, in essence, have you done business with these people before, one way or another? They all said no, of course. But it really wasn't, those questions weren't in order, in my opinion. There were some interesting articles in the newspapers over the last 2 weeks. And my own view is, as I say all the time on this program, and have for almost a year, is that selectmen shouldn't fight their political battles in newspapers that have wide distribution and make our town look bad. And I know that the summit attendees would agree with this. So if you become a selectman or a town manager or vote for selectmen in the future, keep this in mind when you choose your selectmen. The appropriate way to handle misunderstandings or perceived mistakes is to contact the selectman or town manager responsible and discuss the situation in an attempt to understand and resolve the issue. This is how relationships are developed, and that's how mutual trust is also developed. So we keep having all these concerns about mutual trust, yet we keep doing things to drive a wedge between the selectmen, and the selectmen themselves are doing it. So they need to rethink that. And again, I would ask the party leaders to pay more attention to this and see if you can do some coaching here to try to help. For example, if I were in the minority, and I know more minorities a very difficult position, and they don't make all the mistakes, both parties make mistakes, is I would meet with the town manager once a week for an hour, or more, or less, and just make sure all issues are on the table. And they don't pile up till the next selectman meeting, and they don't go to the newspaper before they can be resolved. And when they do go to the newspaper, we present a solid, positive front. I hope this advice helps you when you run for office or vote for selectmen at the next election. Your vote makes all the difference. I want to point out that we've got a good town manager here, and we have good selectmen. We want to keep our town manager. But town managers that are good don't stay in an environment where they can't accomplish their goals and objectives that they're held responsible for. They're not just going to sit here and take it on the chin. They want to get in there and get the job done, do it properly, establish a good track record for themselves, their families, and their future. So we need to help them. We need to create an environment for success, like Phil Fellows said, and I had on a previous program. The job of the managers, the selectmen, is to create an environment where everybody can work efficiently and effectively. And that includes helping the town manager, not hindering the town manager. On another note, if you watch a rerun of the selectmen meeting closely, you may see an environmentalist beating a dead horse over and over again. There were several sightings of a black bear, in the center of town. My wife saw one actually crossing Main Street, going between the police station and the post office a couple of weeks ago. I hope no one beats that bear over and over again. Animal rights people, please rise up and be counted. So on we go with today's meeting. The agenda, I've talked comments enough for tonight. I thought it would be a good time to do it because I have a little extra time tonight. Now I'll go through the normal notices. One page on the budget's all I'm going to do tonight because the meeting's coming up pretty quick. An update of the selectmen meeting comments, and if we get to it, just a page or two on charter revision meeting we had on the 8th of July that the town manager went to and gave us some of his views. Notices. The Highland Lake Special Planning for Success program, that's this program right here, has been moved to July 17th. I did that because we had a selectmen meeting this week, and I wanted to report on the selectmen meeting. 8 p.m. on Channel 13. So same time as now, only a week later. So I will talk. The program is mainly aimed at the summer residents. The people that are here all year round should know everything I'm going to say. There will be a lot of what I call the hard core watching to see what mistakes I make, and so they can relay that around or whatever. But I'm not really aiming at them. I'm aiming at the people that are only here in the summer that perhaps don't know exactly what's happening in town and at the lake and together as a team. The special town meeting to explain the 205 capital projects resolution was held on July 7th, 2008, right after the regular select meeting at Gilbert. The referendum will be held at the town hall. Town hall. There was a mistake in the paper about that the other day. I think they have since corrected that. But in the P. Francis Hicks room, I got the P in the wrong place, but P. Francis Hicks room on Saturday, July 12th, 2008, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Now, I always say to people, it's a little confusing this time because sometimes we have votes at Gilbert. Sometimes they start at 6 in the morning, and sometimes, usually the national elections, they end at 8 at night. Then sometimes we have them at Pearson, and sometimes we have them in the P. Francis Hicks room at the town hall. So this one on Saturday, this Saturday, in 2 more days, will be in the P. Francis Hicks room July 12, 2008, from 8 to 8, and it's very important that you vote. This is on the 205 or 206, whatever number you want to use, bond issue. We're going to say, if it's approved, we say $55,000, and that is the goal. So if you're eligible, please vote. Now, I must say, at the meeting the other night, there were only about 5 or 6 people there. More will see it on television, so I would suggest that you watch the rerun of it on television, probably be right after on Saturday morning, after the regular selectmen meeting. You might see a bit of but the meeting didn't last long, and a special town meeting that they had. So you should be able to see that. And if you need any more information, the best thing to do is to go to the town clerk or the finance director or the town manager's office and ask for the detail. It's too much to go into on this program, but there is a sheet of paper they handed out at the meeting that anybody can get and read to be up to date on exactly what's happening and what this referendum is all about. The proposed 2008-2009 budget was not reduced at the June 23rd, 2008 annual town budget meeting, as I said last time. The next town budget referendum will be on Saturday, June 19th, 2008, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Pearson School. So this Saturday, P. Francis Hicks Room at Town Hall, and then on June 19th, which is also a Saturday, at from 8 to 8 at the Pearson School. And it's very important that you vote. And if you need absentee ballots, they're available at the town clerk's office in the town hall. So if you contact the town clerk's office and ask there about town, for an absentee ballot and all the rules associated with it, you can get them there. And again, if eligible, please vote. It's very important that everybody votes because these are important issues for the community. And I'll join the chorus of many and many people who say, let's all get out and vote on these issues. The special board meeting to be held on Monday, June 30th, last Monday, a week ago, did not occur due to a misunderstanding, an honest misunderstanding, and will be rescheduled at a later date. I personally don't know what that later date is. Somebody else might, but as soon as I find out, I'll put it up. It may be either at a special meeting or maybe at the normal meeting or whatever. I don't know, but we'll keep an eye out for that. That's when they're going to try to move the money around between, where necessary, between town departments to balance things out at the end of the year. The next charter revision meeting will be held at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, July 23rd, 2008, in the town hall. Public comment is accepted during the first 15 minutes or so, and this is a pretty good commission in that if they're talking about something and you're in the audience and during the meeting and you're an expert on it, they'll ask your opinion in most cases. So we don't have that very often, but when we do have it, they're very good about listening to people. And as I said, during this meeting that we had on the 8th, that I might talk about at the end of the program if time, the town manager did come and he gave us some of his thoughts. He did not take a stand on the mayoral versus town manager. He was trying to just tell us ways we could probably make the charter better to run the town, no matter which form of government we choose. So I thank everybody for that. They had, nobody showed up there on Monday, but it was a meeting that could have been much more efficient. It lasted about an hour, probably should have lasted a half an hour, but it was a good meeting otherwise. Board of Selectmen, this is the meeting on July 7th, last Monday. Now, up at the Gilbert School, and I'll probably mention it later again, but they don't have a way to broadcast that live from the Gilbert Auditorium. So Channel 13 goes up, they take a videotape, and they then replay it, say 8 or 9 at night or whenever they get to it. So, and the reason they held it at Gilbert is they expected more people to come to the public town meeting. Not many, only 4 or 5 people, maybe 10 were there, so it was kind of a waste, but they didn't know that ahead of time, so that's what happened. So now, what happened was the Charter Channel 13 got there a little bit late, maybe 15 minutes, I don't know exactly how late, and so the tape will be missing the first 15 minutes or so of the meeting, maybe 10 minutes of the meeting, whatever. But you can still get the gist of most of the meeting by watching that. So there was a call to order, public comment, agenda items only in the front. Nobody was there for that. Nobody wanted to speak at that. Approval of previous minutes. There were 4 sets of minutes that were approved. Boards and commissions. There was one thing raised there, which I'll talk about later, about the Danbury Quarter Cemetery. Town manager's report, which was very short. His report was actually very short, but then there was a lot of this, a lot of communication that I think a lot of it wasn't necessary, but that took up quite a bit of time. And he was very respectful, and he answered all the questions, and for those of us in hard chairs, it wasn't a pleasure. But contract for the plan of conservation and development. Town manager put that on the agenda. Resolution authorizing the town manager, Keith J. Roberts, to sign the application for the municipal plan of conservation and development grant. Another one that was put on by the town manager. Approval of a suspense list. I'll tell you later what that is. That'll possibly be a write-off, and will by the finance director before the end of the year is wrapped up with the auditors and all. Special meeting June 30th. The 2 minority selectmen put that on the agenda, and that was discussed. Rural transit. The town manager put that on the agenda. That's the candy striper bus that you've been reading about in the paper, that issue. 11, easement for 610 West Wakefield Boulevard. The town manager put that on the agenda. Public comment number 2, which is where anybody can get up and say whatever they want. One person did get up and speak there. Unfinished business, new business, and then an executive session on, I think it was a lawsuit of some sort or some kind of a disagreement the town had. And that was put on by the town manager for an executive session. And then when they came out of executive session, there was one action, which I don't have here, but I do have it on the next one. They agreed to write a check to the Lolliers for a little over $1,000 in settlement of whatever argument they had in the executive session and over the months and years probably. So it looks like that's been finally agreed, and we, the town, are writing out a check for one reason or another to them. And then the meeting was adjourned. Again, red is policy, green non-policy. On this chart's in gray is info. Now I want to speak one thing about this agenda. I want to tell you that just like the last agenda we talked about last two weeks ago, this is an excellent agenda. An excellent agenda, because everything except that one issue put on by the minority selectmen was put on by the town manager. So once again, 2 meetings in a row, the town manager put on almost all the items to be discussed on the agenda. So he goes out and does his work with his managers, all the people who report to him, interfaces with the Board of Education, has meetings, and there's a whole list of meetings that he's had, as I think I showed you before, put up, 25 or 30, goes to events, goes to things that people invite him to in town, like an Economic Development Commission meeting or something like that. And then he comes back to the selectmen, as he should, and asks for decisions, right? Or asks to discuss an issue, whatever it is he wants to do. And then he puts it on the agenda. So that's the way it should run. Hasn't run like that in a long, long time, and I think it's very good. So now we'll talk a bit about the 8 issues that were put on this year, that were voted on this week. The first one was a vote to authorize the town manager, Keith Robbins, to sign the contract between the town of Winchester Technical Planning and Technical Planning Associates, Inc. They call it the TPA Design Group. Now, this is the group that the contract, rough contract, was negotiated with by the Planning and Zoning Commission with the help of the planning director, and maybe even the town manager was involved in it, I don't know. But between the town of Winchester Technical Planning Associates, TPA, and the TPA Design Group, dating June 24, 2008, for the plan of conservation and development. That's a very important thing we need. We'll talk a bit more about that later in the program. After the 2 amendments that were recommended by the town attorney have been implemented. So this rough contract, or this draft contract, went to the town attorney. He recommended 2 changes to it, and this says, hey, put those 2 changes in, and the selectmen agree to, it was a motion by Selectman Ham, a second by Selectman Liskin, and they voted to authorize that. So the next one was a vote to authorize the town manager, Keith Robbins, to sign the application from the Office of Policy Management for the Municipal Plan of Conservation and Development Grant Program. We recently received a grant, as I think I'll mention later, for $20,000 to work on our POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development. And that's a very important thing for us, and we sure needed the money. So we have that. Now the paperwork has to be followed up by the town manager. That was voted on. Motion Capabianca, second Liskin, unanimous decision. Vote to approve the expense tax list as provided by the Collector of Tax Revenue, Arlene Boughton, and is recommended by the town manager, Keith Robbins. What this is, when we do vehicle taxes every year, some people don't pay their their vehicle taxes, and they have a thing called the suspend list, and every once in a while we kind of have to deal with it. So it's up to roughly, say, 75,000 now. That's not an exact number, it's a rough idea of people who haven't paid these vehicle taxes. So what we have to do, in a way, is write them off this year. So this wasn't a vote to write them off. It was a vote to just to get the suspend list agreed that Ellen Boughton put forward. It'll go now to the finance director, and he'll have to deal with it in a bookkeeping manner. But now what happens is the motor vehicle department keeps that list and keeps everybody on their list. And if these people who owe money go down at any future date to register a car, upgrade their driver's license, or anything to do with their motor vehicle or another motor vehicle, they'll have to pay this tax. Then it'll come back to the town of Winchester as revenue in some future year. But it can't be predicted. So there was a decision regarding the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen that was supposed to be held on June 30th, 2008. There was a lot of unnecessary conversation about that, but in the end, it was a consensus of the board that all members of the Board of Selectmen shall be notified of any cancellations prior to any Board of Selectmen meeting or somebody wants to cancel. So they made that an agreement, and that's to keep a miscommunication like we had before from happening again. The next one is a decision on rural transit. That's the candy striper and whatever else is involved in that. It was recommended by the board that after the budget passes for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2008, that the arrangements for the funding for the rural transit be taken from the Selectmen's Contingency Fund to cover this line item. So they'll now have to wait for the budget to pass. If the budget passes, the Selectmen will get together, all 7 of them, and they'll decide how much to take out of the Selectmen's Contingency Fund. They'll do that, so for all you who ride the candy striper, it looks like it will be here. Now, one of the misunderstandings there was about the candy striper was the town manager wasn't aware, for one reason or another, that if we didn't put in our $2,000 approximately, the state wasn't going to put in $17,000. So that's where the real problem came in. So that meant a total hit to these rural transit people of 17 plus 2, which is 19,000, so they were going to have to cut out some services. But I think that's been rectified now. I don't know much about what the state's going to do here, but I'm pretty sure that if we put in our amount, they're probably still going to put in their amount, although I'm not positive that will come out. But you can rest assured, candy stripers, that one way or another, this bus will probably keep running. The next decision, it was decided that Keith Robbins, as town manager, will contact Benjamin Thomas, he's the town historian, in regards to forming a committee to reestablish the Danbury Quarter Cemetery Commission. So I think that what they want to do is form a commission to review the Danbury Quarter Cemetery and see what work needs to be done, and then try to figure out where they're going to get the money to do it and move ahead with that. So the town manager will be contacting this historian, Benjamin Thomas, and And by the next selectmen meeting, he should have something to report on that. The next is to vote to grant the easement for 610 West Wakefield Boulevard, as suggested by the town manager, Keith Robbins, and recommended by Planning and Zoning. Motion, Capabianca. Second, Selectman Ham. And I think, I'm pretty sure, I don't have it here, but that was voted on unanimously. Vote to authorize a refund in the amount of $1,034 as recommended by the town council and the town manager. That goes to the Lolliers. That came out of the executive session. I don't know what it's for or what the dispute was about, but it looks like it's now settled. Motion, Selectman Capabianca. Second, Selectman Liskin. And red is complete, blue's in progress, yellow's not yet started. Now, we still do have a couple blues outstanding here, and I pointed that out in an email to one or two people, that we have that tax deferral for the elderly still outstanding, and the Lambercade joint plan is still outstanding. And this has been here since 1/22/08, and this has been here since July 7th, 2008. And there were some previous things before that even. So anyway, that's that. So as you can see, there were about eight decisions made. Major status report doesn't change much this week, doesn't change at all this week. But after the budget's done and we start getting some work done on the town manager's goals and objectives, we may be able to change these at least to light blue, maybe not to red, which means they're finished. But red means achieved, blue means in progress, yellow means not yet started. And I think some of these yellows, to be honest with you, have been started a little bit now, but I can't report on that until I get an official word from somebody about it. Okay, total policy since the election. Yes, 151 plus 8, 159. There's 8 are from this week. And no, 14 plus 0 this week. They're all issues. Some of them went on too long and all that, but they were all policy issues this week. So it's still 92%, 159 to 14, which is darn good, darn good. And we appreciate that. Everybody did behave in a business-like manner this week, even though there was a lot of micromanagement and a lot of paranoia. Yes, 15, no, 1. So we have a 94% record there. 15 out of 16 since the election have been businesslike. And businesslike, once again, means nobody hollers at each other, calls each other names, misbehaves, that kind of thing. It doesn't mean we won't have spirited discussion. It doesn't mean we won't have some micromanagement. It doesn't mean we won't have some paranoia. So that's kind of where we stand. I had toyed with the idea of coming up with a new chart called micromanagement or unnecessary discussions. But I think we got enough charts for now, so I'm not going to do that. The audience here, after 6 to 9 months of watching my program, I'm pretty sure is, at least I'm getting a lot of feedback, that they're pretty well educated about this stuff now, and they can see it for themselves. Okay, the meeting comments. We'll go through those. We got another 15 minutes or so, maybe a little less. Some I already touched on, so I'll probably go kind of fast through these. But the regular selectmen meeting started at 6 p.m. Maybe that's one of the reasons some of the people didn't get there. But and some went down to the town hall thinking it was in the town hall. But we've been saying all along it was going to be up at Gilbert. But not everybody sees these programs, and not everybody is not called to their attention. So it started at 6 p.m. at the Gilbert School, where there is no live TV facility, at least in the auditorium. The videotaping for the TV began a bit late, as I said earlier, so repeats on Channel 13 will be partial. I would say about 2/3 of the meeting was recorded, might have been 3/4, but it's in that neighborhood. The first part is missing. Less than 10 residents, I didn't actually count the residents, but less than 10 residents showed up for both meetings. Same people were there for both meetings. I did see a couple people join into the second meeting that weren't in the first meeting, but not only 2 or 3, maybe 4. So I think 10 is even a high number. It might have been like 6 or 7 people there. There was no public comment on the initial agenda items, only segment at the beginning of the meeting. And the minutes of 4 previous meetings, as I said earlier, were unanimously approved without ceremony. There was no ceremony, no discussion. Nobody had any question about the meeting, so they agreed those. The town manager Oh, there was a request by the town historian, Benjamin Thomas, as I mentioned, to form a committee to reestablish the Danbury Quarter Cemetery Commission. And follow up with the historian for the next meeting. The decision will most certainly be favorable. So I'm pretty sure you're going to end up with another commission there. And they did talk a bit about trying to keep it small. The town manager did mention it's better to have 5, 6 maybe people than 13 or 14. So that message got across. I wholeheartedly agree with that, and most businessmen will agree as well. People from bureaucracies tend to want 13. You know, once I was at a telephone company in New York as a pretty high executive, and I went into one meeting where 55 people in there, you know. So not surprisingly, we cut that number down very rapidly to a workable number. The town manager announced that the Wall of America project has received some excellent publicity in recent publications around the state. Summer-type publications, like what to do this summer. You know, one from Hartford, one from Waterbury, one from wherever, you know, around the state. And they all had a good thing to say about the Wall of America project here, making people aware of it and that it was on its way. And that's not surprising, that good news. Knowing that the capabilities of Ellen Griesendeck and Barbara DeBellis, our old Friends of Main Street leader, Noggle, are very positive people. They're very good entrepreneurs, and they present a very positive, good image for themselves and for the town of Winston. So I can't say enough about how positive these people are and how good they are and how infectious it is to anybody who gets around them. The town manager fielded many questions from the selectmen, some trivial, some interesting, and some unnecessary and time-consuming. So watch this program for yourself, determine what you think, and then keep it in mind at the next election. The town manager, as a responsible CEO, accepted full responsibility for 2 minor misunderstandings that happened since the last meeting. As you know from previous planning and success programs, misunderstandings are inevitable for any team that's moving fast. The important thing is to recognize them and take corrective action as soon as possible. Now, we'll get to planning and zoning a bit here, and it came up at the meeting. Good progress is being made on the plan of conservation and development. Update. A contract has been drafted, and this is the best news of all. Finally, it looks like the Enterprise Corridor, that's the route between Winston and Torrington, the Enterprise Corridor that's been agreed by the state, actually has been agreed by the state, I think, all the way from Colebrook all the way down to Torrington. There's been a contract drafted, and it looks like Enterprise Corridor and the urgently needed sewer permission for the major developments will be high on the priority list. So they're taking an evolutionary approach like we've always thought it should be, and as it stands now, it looks like, and it's not easy to see in the minutes, the meetings are very convoluted and very difficult to understand, but I did have a meeting with somebody in the town hall and talked about it, and it looks like the Enterprise Corridor may be the first priority, and with that, they will also resolve with the Water and Sewer Commission the sewer and water for the major developments along that corridor. So that's very good news. It's a big step forward, in my opinion. Other people will argue that it's always was going to be that way, but we think that that's very, very good news. Now, I want to say here that the addition of $20,000 state grant, you know, they still have some paperwork to do on that, but the grant is pretty much assured to work on the POCD. We add that to the current $15,500, which I think, and I'm hoping they appropriated from last year's budget so that they could keep the money for next year. And then if the new budget is approved, there's another $15,000 or so in there for that. So now we're up to a goodly sum, and that sum, if the next budget is approved at referendum, that sum will be about $50,500, which is about half of what they said they needed to do. Well, it's a little less than half of what they said they needed to do the whole plan of conservation and development. So that's a big, big sum to work with. It will be carefully managed, of course, by the selectmen and the Planning and Zoning Commission and the town manager and the town planning director of planning. It's the largest amount available to planning and zoning in many, many years. So when you're thinking maybe these selectmen aren't doing a good job, they are the first selectmen in many years to get any substantial amount of money to the Planning and Zoning Group to do the plan of conservation and development. And the good news is almost half of it, not quite half, 20,000, comes from the state. So that's good news for us. And we begin the evolutionary approach, and we'll get going, and there'll be some, maybe within 6 months we can have some kind of a resolution on this enterprise quarter, not guaranteed, but we're talking about that kind of a time frame, and we're not going to wait, as I understand it, to do the whole plan first. So thank everybody. If you see the selectmen, all 7 of them, thank them for that. And I do still feel we're running on 5 pistons here, and I don't think we're going to run on 7 pistons during this term of office, but let's hope we can. In a lot of cases, we do run on 7 pistons, but on all the big issues, the real big ones, we don't. Thanks to the new businessmen for this long-needed infusion of capital. The last group of selectmen, they could have moved $15,500 over for the plan of conservation and development, but they didn't. And previous ones could have done the same, but they didn't. The important thing is these people did. Okay, according to the town manager, there's one hitch in the state grant money, the $20,000. The POCD must be adopted in one form or another by June 30th, 2010, or the grant money must be returned to the state. I got to check on the interest of that, whether we have to return it with interest or not. Since the state POCD adoption process is, from all I understand from attending meetings and talking to people, can be approached in a relatively simple manner, this should not be a major problem for the town if properly managed. We have to manage this very carefully so we don't have to give that $20,000 back to the state. The expense list is a list of long overdue unpaid vehicle tax bills. I already explained that to you. The motor vehicle department will keep a record of it. We'll probably write it off, and then when the money does come in future years, it'll come in as revenue to the town of Winsted and Winchester. We already mentioned a special selectment meeting. We already mentioned the candy striper. I guess you can all feel more relaxed about that. I don't think that's going to disappear in the near future. Yeah, the oversight will be rectified one way or another by the selectmen and the town manager. Whether it'd be easy to rectify if the budget gets turned down, and I'm not suggesting we turn the budget down, but then they can make some more decisions and they can cut things and they can add things. So it's up to them what they do. We talked about the Lalliers and we talked about the easement. So I'll just spend 2 minutes now, or 1 minute maybe. I'm running out of time here, but the charter revision. A meeting was held on July 8th. The town manager, Keith Robbins, attended and spoke during the public comment. He was very good. You can read the minutes when they're produced and see what he had to say. There was consensus by the Charter Revision Commission on eliminating a restriction in the charter concerning the town of Winchester Finance Director and the Board of Education. In the next meeting or the meeting after, I'll explain to you what that change is going to be, how it's going to be worded. We haven't done it yet. So I don't know the exact wording, and I don't want to confuse anybody. There will most likely be a public hearing on the charter revision draft during August. You'll probably read that in the paper soon, because I think the chairman's going to be talking with the newspapers here, and she's going to bring them up to date on where we stand. And remember, if you need any minutes at all from the Charter Revision Commission or any of the papers that people sent to the Charter Revision Commission, and there's even one. There's a tape disc of the last public hearing where everybody's speaking. You can listen to that. I've already listened to it. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. Stay tuned next week for my Highland Lake special of this meeting, And then the following week, we'll have another selectmen meeting. We'll be back in synchronization again. Thank you very much.